listeners. Welcome to episode 2 of Across the Pond podcast with me and Martin, our international fellow at the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Today we have a really exciting guest on. I followed him. I met him years ago when I was a fledgling, and he's done way more than I have. We've got Dr. Charles Gardner with INNCO. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I'll let him talk more. Charles, thanks for joining us. And do you want to introduce yourself and say hey to the people?
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm delighted to have been invited by Lindsey and Martin, people I know. And so I'm the executive director of INNCO. I'm a neurobiologist by training. I've worked for the World Health Organization, for the Rockefeller Foundation, for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, always focused on HIV, TB, malaria, dengue, rabies, nutrition, child health, and stuff like that. And I have come into this field of tobacco control about 3 years ago because I'm a former smoker. I quit using a safer nicotine product, so I know it works and I know that my health improved. Now, INNCO is a nonprofit organization. We have 37 member organizations in as many countries, and we represent and support the rights of 98 million people worldwide who use safer nicotine to avoid toxic forms of tobacco.
Can you international network of consumers? What's the INNCO stand for? Sorry.
It's the International Network of Nicotine Consumer Organizations.
So it's all consumers.
It is. So I represent a secretariat. I have a board that I have to report to, but this is an umbrella organization because there are 37 separate and independent member organizations in every continent on Earth. So with Latin America, our membership is growing very fast in Latin America and in Africa. And I'm delighted by that. But we have also members in Asia, South Asia, and obviously Europe. We have a lot of members in Europe.
Yeah, Martin, you want to add to that? Europe, over
I know
there.
A few of them. I know a few. Yeah, a few of them are INNCO and also EFMA, which the New Nicotine Alliance in the UK is a founder member of, and it's great to have so much consumer involvement in all these things, and we're going to need it as well. As you know, Charles, there's all sorts of things on the horizon. COP9, they've talked about postponing a lot of decisions till COP10, but there's still going to be a COP9, and anything can happen at it. It depends what the parties choose themselves to focus on. I have heard there are some delegations not going, but they can. I think the COP Secretariat can put people in to act on their behalf. So there's plenty to worry about, and especially in Europe. I think it's next year that they're going to re-look at the Tobacco Products Directive, and all signs are that that's just going to be even worse. I mean, you'll know all about the SHEAR or the SKIA committee, Charles, that produced an appalling report about e-cigarettes, and it doesn't bear any relation to real life. So yeah, there are plenty of threats, and I've been saying for a couple of years now that the consumers have got to be on their guard, and they've got to act. I mean, the problem we have in this country is that now we've left the EU, vapers in this country think that's it, game over for us. Our government's going to protect us, nothing's going to happen, they've got our back. But as I keep trying to tell them, a week is a long time in politics, and things can change very swiftly if you don't keep your finger on the pulse, and they've got to be aware. So yeah, I'd say to all the consumers that the other side never sleeps, and we've got to keep an eye on the ball and make sure that consumers act to protect what they've already got, let alone what could be taken away from them in the future.
And the other side is very well funded, and we are not actually. Yeah. They all think that we're funded by big tobacco, which is kind of a laugh, because
Wouldn't that be nice if we were funded by big tobacco? I mean, we'd get so much done, We'd be handing out vape pens to everybody. Oh, you're a smoker? Here you go.
My surveys of the advocacy community for safer nicotine and harm reduction in this field show that 75% of us actually hate big tobacco. And we're constantly accused of working for big tobacco. On the other side, the harm reduction deniers are funded very heavily by one
Michael
American
Bloomberg.
billionaire.
Yeah, Michael.
By one American billionaire. And it's like he's spending at least $152 million a year, basically anti-vaping propaganda.
And he does it through so many arms. It's like, I mean, he's funded everywhere from PACs to, grassroots campaigning, to, I mean, and it's just insane, actually. I mean, he really has it stuck in his craw. And if you go through the Bloomberg, tax documents, you'll see it's like 80% of his budget literally is on anti-tobacco efforts.
Hey, these guys are the new merchants of doubt. Same tactics, right? So all you have to do is convince the public that the experts disagree.
You drop that Heartland reference. I've heard that before with Heartland Institute.
It's tactics that were honed to great perfection by the tobacco industry itself.
What I
find, can I just say, what I find very interesting about Bloomberg and pretty damning in his methods is he's kind of got virtual integration to a fine art. If you've not heard of the term, it's basically taking over every control of, say, a manufacturing process. So you'll have a company will buy up companies, and so they control every piece of, from raw materials right through to the finished product. And that's generally seen as not great for competition in business. But with him, he sets the agenda, he funds the research, he funds the politicians, he funds the researchers, he funds everything. And then when something gets through the legislature, he then funds the advertising afterwards to say what a great success it is. He's at every part of the supply chain from start to finish. His idea right through to the finished article, he funds.
Martin, would that include the report that just came out of the World Health Organization?
Well, exactly, yeah. Funded that.
Memo, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it was everything. I mean, I had Bloomberg oozing out of every single page of it. Yeah, it was, bans, these don't work, and, pharma, go towards pharma pills.
So, I mean, here's the thing. He's a known tobacco harm reduction denier. He's a known anti-vapor. And the Bloomberg Philanthropies actually took credit for that World Health Organization report that slammed e-cigarettes.
Well, they funded it.
They funded it. And this is exactly equivalent to a World Health Organization report on vaccines that was funded by a known billionaire anti-vaxxer, or a UN report on climate change that was funded by a known American billionaire climate change denier. Like, nobody would accept that, but for some reason in tobacco control, this is acceptable.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, and I mean, have you ever seen the picture of the coctopus?
The what?
The coctopus. So it's an octopus with like the coke guys, and then all the tentacles go to like everything that they're funding. You can do that with Bloomberg, and it does go beyond tobacco, but tobacco seems to be his most pervasive. That he's going after. The other thing would be soda. I'm in Cook County, Illinois, so he spent $13 million campaigning for that one here, and then also like sat there in the middle of it, offering to pay for these commissioners to get reelected, even though like their own constituents didn't want it. But this New York former mayor, like, I mean, it was funny actually when he did the soda tax, or he did the junk food tax in Mexico, and I was actually going through some of the news stories back then, and like it's 2014. They're like, I learned, there's a Spanish, no Bloomberg tax, and it's insane. Now, you guys both brought up, and I do, for viewers that don't know, COP9, Conference of the Parties. Can one of you guys want to explain it and like what it is and why it's so important?
Mark?
I don't mind. Well, yeah, COP9, it's Conference of the Parties, the 9th Conference of the Parties, the World Health Organization's Framework Convention of Tobacco Control. I've been to one. It's just this massive jamboree for delegations from all over the world to come and talk about what policies they like to recommend for countries all over the world. I think there are some like 180 signatories to it, and it's generally sort of shoved down this general direction, a railroad into the direction with harm reduction of either restricting it very tightly or banning it altogether. That's all forms of tobacco harm reduction. They don't seem to be wanting to listen to the evidence. And at the end of the day, although the parties themselves, so the delegations from all the different countries, they're the ones who make the decisions. They kind of get reports shoveled to them by the COP Secretariat, and they're highly not impartial. They're highly biased towards condemning tobacco harm reduction. They're not getting the proper messages. So we've been talking about the UK delegation over here and trying to sort of get them to go along and stand up for harm reduction at COP9. But there are many countries who won't, which you'll know all about, Charles. There's many countries in this world who probably haven't got the resources to put together their own tobacco control policies, and they just rely on the WHO to almost write them for them. So they turn up at these events and they're just told what to do. And unfortunately, because a lot of this, it does run on consensus, but the consensus is guided one way or the other. So when you've got a big block of countries that are trying to push in one direction, then some others will go with them. So it's important for the countries that are in favour of harm reduction and have got good policies to stand up and say, no, we believe harm reduction works. And that's the way we can get COP to make some decent decisions. It's just whether those delegations in those countries have got the gumption, if you like, to stand up to the general consensus, which is mostly anti-tobacco harm reduction.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the world's first and only global treaty on health. And it was crafted, negotiated about 20 years ago. The signatories agreed to many things, including a definition of tobacco control, which includes harm reduction. And what we have now is kind of a rogue secretariat funded by Michael Bloomberg, to go back to him again, that is rejecting harm reduction and equating it in every one of their documents with industry influence. So if you're in favor of tobacco harm reduction, you represent industry influence in their minds. And I believe that these people actually believe that. And so, and then there's the Article 5.3, which simply encourages countries not to have undue influence in their policies from the tobacco industry. But that's been interpreted by the Secretariat in all kinds of extreme ways to exclude anyone who ever looked sideways at the dog of a person who was a secretary 5 years ago in a tobacco company. And so here we are. So we've got a climate change treaty. And the fossil fuel industry is welcomed into those discussions. And when the fossil fuel industry invests in solar power and in wind energy, that's like, they're applauded.
Bloomberg, actually, it's so funny that you bring that up, because Bloomberg's part of that energy council that, yeah, it's heads of ExxonMobil and everything, and they're the ones pushing for that quote unquote revenue neutral carbon tax. But it's so funny that you brought that up.
So here we have to exclude the tobacco industry. Okay. I get that.
It's a weird thing. Like they're the one industry that, like, if you had an automobile that was bad, they would require it to like change it to make it safer. Tobacco is the only industry I can see in the world that is literally, they can't do this. They can't make their products safer. But at the same time, we're not banning cigarettes. It's just insane to me, quite honestly, when I think about it. And it's just, yeah. And it really does come down to the WHO, that the FCTC treaty, and that whole line that you can't have, the tobacco companies are bad and God forbid they do anything.
So as Clive Faith has pointed out, I mean, there's the thinking is that there's an irreconcilable conflict between tobacco control and the tobacco industry. once you believe that, so they're branded as evil and in perpetuity. So 1,000 years from now, they're not going to look like, they're not even going to be making cigarettes 50 years from now, but they're still going to be evil by that line of thinking. But the other thing is, like, the safer nicotine industry is not all tobacco companies. It's a lot of companies that are actually trying to kill big tobacco's main cash cow, and they're all branded as big tobacco too. So
well,
there's a, in fact, there's, like you mentioned about if you agree with the tobacco industry on harm reduction, for example, you're not agreeing with the tobacco industry, you're agreeing that harm reduction is a good way to go. You're then told by these people in tobacco control that you're acting in the interests of the tobacco industry because they make harm reduced products, which is bizarre. So then you're put in the category of industry because you kind of agree that products are a good thing. And there are meetings, I've seen the exclusion criteria for some of these meetings that WHO and others do in tobacco control, and they actually talk about if a relative of yours once worked for industry, and going back 6 generations, they're talking about, you can't attend an event. If someone in your family once worked for Imperial Tobacco in the UK and Nottingham, for example, in 1903, then you're not allowed to attend a meeting. I mean, how they're supposed to discover that?
I'll never be able to, well, aren't we all on tobaccotactics.org? I know you are, Martin. I've never looked you up, Charles.
No, I'm not.
You're not?
It really pissed me off.
Air 5, I mean, has Campaign for Tobacco Free Kids blocked you on Twitter yet?
Oh yeah, they blocked me like 3 years ago.
See, I was late to that game, and when they blocked me when I was sharing the golden oldies videos. Like, I wasn't being, obtuse to them or anything, but Martin's got a whole page on tobacco tactics. I'm jealous.
I know. I read it.
I used to have 2.
And oh wait, it's another Michael Bloomberg funded, at University of Bath. Totally got the Bloomberg. And okay, so back to INNCO, and especially, I mean, I think it's fantastic that you're heading it. I know when they were running it, I was like, wow, he is the perfect fit for that. I mean, your background, your international reach. What's going on internationally in the world of vape? Like what's, you and I are based in the States, Martin's out in the UK, where it's like the vape mecca pretty much, it's government's pretty much handing out vapes there. What's going on in other places?
Well, I mean, so the good and the bad. Our membership is growing. We have an increasing number of organizations in more countries. That's a good thing, and people are increasingly active and stepping up. Unfortunately, there's a lot of apathy in the field and in the community of people who use safer nicotine, and we need to overcome that because this is actually a battle. The fact is that a lot of our members are in countries where e-cigarettes and other safer nicotine products are just completely banned. So I've just done an interview with Asa Saligupta in Thailand, and e-cigarettes are banned in Thailand. And if you're caught vaping in public, you can be fined, or you can even be imprisoned. And other countries have done the same. There was a report just last month about a young man being caned. Where was that? In Singapore, for vaping. So there's a kind of a craziness to punishing people for quitting smoking in the wrong way. And then, other countries have more open policies, but everywhere you see this influence, actually from the anti-vaping propaganda to ban flavors to raise the legal age and so on. So it is a constant battle. In the Latin American countries, our members tell me that numerous laws have been proposed. They all use exactly the same language that was provided to them by a lawyer who works for
the Big B.
either Bloomberg or Tobacco Free Kids. So Tobacco Free Kids has a very they have leadership in a lot of the grant making for Bloomberg Philanthropies internationally.
Yeah, I didn't realize how big they were in the international space until like I went through like a Bangladesh NGO and like going and on their Facebook and then just going through pictures and seeing, they had a conference and they got the banner up and you see CTFK, you also see Vital Strategy is another Bloomberg backed organization. And I was shocked actually, because I know their breadth in the United States. I mean, I was on, especially in the state hearings, like there was always a CTFK representative. There's always a TPA representative there too. But I was astonished just to see how much they were in other countries.
So it's quite public that they came to the Philippines Food and Drug Administration and paid them a chunk of money to embrace certain policies that they endorse, and to basically manipulate the government policies of a poor country. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So a lot of what they're doing is very similar practices in other countries. Money, people make different decisions because of money. And so, I can't imagine any more clear example of bias than that.
Especially in countries like in Africa and places like that, where, like you say, a bit of funding and you go, here's a suite of tobacco control policies. All you have to do is that, and we'll throw you a bit of cash into the bargain. Yeah, it's.
So we're delighted at the policies that the UK has embraced, Martin.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've been involved in that. I know you have a voice in decisions around the delegation that goes to COP9 and decisions there. Is the UK is it reaching out to any of the Commonwealth countries?
Well, we'd like to think they would do. Countries like New Zealand, at the COP I went to in India, I was hearing that Canada was doing quite well. It had joined in with the UK, well, not the UK delegation, it was the EU delegation, and they were sort of joining forces to head off some of the worst things that were coming out on vaping from places like Thailand, which has got a nationalised, I think it's a nationalised tobacco industry, isn't it? And Thailand were coming up with all sorts of things they wanted to do to vaping, but Canada and the EU were standing up to them. But then you look at what's happening in Canada now, that they were going one way, and now there's talking about flavour bans. They've got a nicotine cap. They did have some very sensible warnings on vaping products, which just gave you the information. They weren't like the ones in the EU where nicotine is an addictive substance and tries to scare people away. They had some which were information based, but I was looking for those a couple of weeks ago, and it seems the whole document has disappeared off the internet. You just can't find it anymore. It's almost like they're ashamed that they suggested this thing, but it was a very good approach. So yeah, I would hope that the UK delegation would be doing that, and in the UK, consumers have been trying to sort of get that message across to say that the delegation that goes over there should stand up for these policies we've got in our country, which are working very well. But whether they actually will do so or not, they should do. We are the biggest funder of the FCTC by quite a long way. So if they're coming out with policies, or recommendations to ban e-cigarettes, and we've got vape shops in hospitals and e-cigarettes recommended on the NHS, or not on the NHS, but recommended by the NHS, you'd think they would stand up to it, and we hope they will do, and we hope that whether it's this COP9 or whether it's the next one, but they've got to put these discussion points to the COP secretariat, or they've got to put them in front of the parties for whenever they make those decisions, and obviously a lot of it's been put off this year to COP10 in a couple of years. So we've got time, not just us, consumers all over the world have got time to petition their elected representatives and say, can you please go to the conference of the parties and stand up for the interests of people who have found harm reduction to be very useful.
The Framework Convention on Tobacco Control's COP9, the meeting that's going to be held in the the second week of November, has decided, because it's going to be virtual this year because of COVID-19, that they will defer all discussion of anything other than process issues, like the budget and stuff like that, which is process. And that kicks the can down the road to 2023, right? So, which is COP10.
I got to interrupt for 1 second. Do you think that the FDA will be done processing PMTs by that time? Sorry, I had to say it.
Something interesting will happen in, what is it, September 9th?
Yeah, that's only a couple weeks away.
No, and you know, and the scary thing in the United States is that one plausible scenario is that they're going to authorize some nicotine vape products as appropriate for the protection of public health, and they'll all be from big tobacco companies.
Oh yeah, Juul's totally getting a PMTA. I mean, but they are also.
You think so?
They've also, yeah. I mean, I think.
Can you imagine the media screams if Juul is authorized?
I mean, and honestly, like, I don't hate Juul. Like, as like, you know, that was one of the first products that actually got me to get off the way. I mean, it's got an amazing vapor technology. I mean, I really wish they'd bring back cucumber, okay? And no kids were vaping that, and I love their cucumber flavor. But I do think that I know that they're going. I mean, they've already signified that they're going to go after market share. And at that point, yeah, it is the big tobacco companies with their vapor products. Because they're in every C-store versus, you know, an e-liquid company, you know, a gourmet e-liquid company is what how I explain it to people who have no idea. It's like you've got Bud Light and then you've got your like hometown IPAs, you know, and they all are under the same regulatory track, but at least with a lot of states like have opened it up to make it easier for these specialized brewers, you know, versus you can't be a specialized, you know, tobacco outlet once again, because it's just the demonization of tobacco. But yeah. But back to COP9, sorry to interrupt you on that one.
I
when
mean,
you say 2023, I'm just like, do you think they'll get through those 6.5 million applications by then?
I mean, my concern is that kicking the can down the road to 2023 allows the FCTC Secretariat and Bloomberg to continue with their messaging, and doesn't allow a country like the UK to step in with its delegation and have a different voice and point out that we're funding you and you're undermining our policies. But it's an interesting contrast between what's going on with the Food and Drug Administration in the United States and the way the UK handles this. The UK, Martin, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the UK regulation is about setting safety standards that all manufacturers need to comply with, right? And so if you have safety standards, as new evidence comes in, you can change them. But in the US, we have this system where every company with every slightly different ingredient or device needs to file this unbelievably expensive duplicative process, application process for authorization from the FDA. And it's like reinventing the wheel, not a few hundred times, but literally millions of times. Mm-hmm. What a waste.
Yeah, I mean, we had the Tobacco Products Directive said that you have to bring in certain. It was a directive, so as a member state of the EU, you couldn't ignore it. You had to do something, and the UK did it. How you do it is up to you as a nation. And fortunately, in the UK, we were quite light touch about it. And what we have now is a system of notification with the MHRA, and I can't remember, Medicine Health Regulatory Authority or something like that, MHRA, and it basically they just give you a list of ingredients you shouldn't have in your liquids. You can't have the normal ones, the ones you'd expect, like acrolein and formaldehyde and diacetyl and things like that. But there's also, you can't have caffeine in there, you can't have taurine, it can't be something that enhances performance, you can't make certain claims for your product. But as long as you abide by those rules, you notify your product 6 months before you want to sell it, and if there's no objections from the MHRA, then you can start selling it. It's just like exactly what you said. It's setting standards, safety standards, to make sure that the products being put on the market are not going to damage the consumers. In this country, we've kind of recognised that harm reduction is a thing and it can be useful. So you just want to make sure that the products go on the market, because effectively they're consumer products in the UK. There are certain groups want more medicinal products, medicinal vaping products, if only to prove prove that they can be sort of given out on the NHS. The proof of concept is what I'm looking for. But generally, they're consumer products.
Is there any device that's been approved as a medicine in the UK?
There was one a few years ago, but it never went to market. And
right, it was a BAT product, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that was probably done just to test the process, I think. But the reason no one has done it is because they obviously don't see profit in it. Because vapors, I know vapors. Vapors they're not ill. They don't want a medicine. They want a consumer product. So
right. When nicotine patches were available by prescription only, far fewer people used them, and even when they used them, they were less effective in helping smokers quit. Because I guess if you have to get it through a doctor's prescription, you think it's more dangerous or something. But Martin, how many adults have quit smoking in the UK with e-cigarettes?
The latest figures were, we've got 3.6 million vapors in the UK, and I think it was 64% of those have quit smoking entirely. So two-thirds.
2.3 million
smokers who use vaping, and only 30% are dual users. So there's now a majority, but that's built up over time. In the early years, you look at the graph and it's sort of gone in an X shape. It used to be people dual use, and this is what people don't understand about dual use. It's part of your journey. My first e-cigarette that I used was, I tried someone else's in 2009, but the first one I bought for myself was in 2010, and I didn't start exclusively using them until 2015. So yeah, I know some people who just thrown their cigarettes in the bin and that's it. Oh wow, this magic device, I'm using this now. But there are lots of people like me who took a while to get used to it. 5 years is a bit extreme, I suppose. But, it does take time. And I've always said to people who ask me for advice, give it time. If people come to, I remember one guy emailed me once who followed me on Twitter and said, look, I'm really worried about my dad. Can you recommend something? So I recommended something easy for him to get along with. And I said to him, just tell your dad, don't try it for one day and think this doesn't work. Try it for 2 or 3 weeks and then see how you feel about it. And in the end, he took to it, quite well. It's not, some people, it is a magic bullet, magic cure, but for others it's not. So this is what gets me so, not angry, but just irritated by people who talk about dual use as if this is a bad thing. It's not.
I'm a dual user.
Yeah,
sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll go live with it, public, that I still smoke, but it's super down to really a limited number of cigarettes. And it's really weird. Like, I still smoke in the morning. That's, waking up, coffee. The cigarette tastes better with coffee. It's like the Sam Cooke song, cigarettes and coffee.
So coffee is the danger here. Then that's your poison, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I like combustion sometimes, but yeah, I mean, if like I'm driving and you get into that, like you think you're gonna get into a car accident or something, like something wonky happens, and you get your knees go numb and everything. Vaping's not going to alleviate that for me. It's gonna still need to have a cigarette, like, oh, I didn't die. Awesome. Yeah. But I'm down to your dual use argument. I mean, they minimize the fact that you're smoking less and less cigarettes. And I can even tell, like, yeah, I'm still dual using, but like me and the boyfriend a couple months ago, we went out to like the Indiana dunes, and like I was able to like walk up the dunes and no problem, versus like 2 years ago when I was just smoking and while writing about vaping issues and yelling, and I'm like, no, I'm good. I like my cigarettes. You write that they're healthier or whatever, but I can see the differences with just minimalizing the amount of cigarettes that I'm smoking. One of the things
I was a dual user also for several years, and like I didn't really try to quit. It just happened. And eventually I was like maybe 1 or 2 cigarettes a day as I was walking to the subway here in New York. And because that was like the thing to do. I was like, I associated it with walking to the subway or walking back from the subway. But we have to also acknowledge that there are a lot of people who quit by accident. And, you know, my surveys have shown us it's a lot of people in the adult ex-smoking community who continue to use safer nicotine vapes, that they'll tell you as many as 40% of them say, I quit by accident. And honestly, nobody ever quit by accident with a nicotine patch or gum or Chantix or Champix, right? It's like, by definition, you're using those things to quit smoking. But the thing I was going after with you, Martin, is I think about 2.3 million smokers have quit in the UK with these gizmos.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think I've seen some data that shows about 26% who quit with e-cigarettes later quit vaping. Right?
Yeah,
which is fine, which is great.
Yeah, people who work for me, some people think that it's necessary to do that, but people who work for me have said the same, you know, and it's exactly the same as people who probably would never. I'm exactly the same as you. I never had a quit attempt at all. I used to enjoy tobacco. I just tried e-cigarettes out because I was interested, and it just got to the point where at one point I asked my wife at the time. I said, "When was the last time I had a cigarette?" Because I honestly couldn't remember. It was purely by accident, you know. But there are people who do think that they should then get off of vaping. But you know, someone worked for me, and she was a smoker. She was asking questions, you know, when she come in the office, and I sort of said, try this, try that, and she tried it. She was getting really well with it. And then about a couple of months later, I went down to the site to see how everyone was getting on, just work-wise. And she said, "Oh, by the way, I've quit the vaping as well." I said, "Really? You know, you didn't have to." And she said, "Yeah, but it was so easy." Yeah, so you know, there's some people do that. Other people like me, I don't think I'll quit my vaping. I just enjoy it too much. But yeah, what you said about the patches and gum, like you said, people would get those because they were making a quit attempt. Whereas if you give them a consumer product and say, well, just use that, it's a consumer product, you can enjoy it. So you're putting more people in the shop window, if you like, of quitting smoking because there are more people of trying it. And if you have more people trying it, you can have more successes, which you don't get necessarily with NRT. I never tried NRT. I never tried patches gum or anything because I wasn't trying to quit. But the accidental ones, exactly like you said, they've just tried something just out of interest or curiosity or what have you, and then might find that they like it.
So if you have 2.3 million people in the UK who are vaping and who have completely quit smoking, so they're all ex-smokers, if 26% of people quit smoking by vaping and then quit vaping, you have to add another 26% to that to find out how many people e-cigarettes or nicotine vapes have actually helped to quit in the UK. And we have to kind of do a similar back of the envelope calculations in the United States. And it really strikes me as seriously problematic in this field. So we know in the United States, we know exactly how many teens have ever looked sideways at an e-cigarette. How many are ever vapors? How many have vaped even one puff in the past month, which they call, strangely with teens, they call current use? How many are frequent vapors, which is more than 20 days per month? And how many are daily vapors? We know everything about what's going on with teens, but the most basic question that a public health person would want to know is how many smokers have quit with these things? And we don't know the answer to that. I think our public health people actually do know the answer to this question, and they're not telling us because it would actually contradict statements from our Surgeon General, for example, which
They did that with COVID too. Okay. I mean, they quit reporting on smoking status and the comorbidities. I mean, they used to give that that weekly update that had, you know, smoking, and even the COVID, like the CDC official, you know, thing you're supposed to fill out when they does ask, well, any health professional asks smoking status. But yeah, when you came out like April of last year, when it was like, wow, out of all these people who died from COVID, 2% were smokers, 3% were former smokers, which indicates that a former smoker had a better chance of getting COVID and dying than a current smoker. And that really upset me. Like, and this is why, like, I get why these people don't trust public health. They're not trusting them for the right reasons. You know, like, that omission, like, why are you not giving this data out? You know, I mean, especially if there is a link between nicotine, you know, we should be exploring it, not, oh, this doesn't fit our narrative. Because I think it really that they've got a narrative in their head, and it really, yeah, it comes down to tobacco is bad, anything, you know, and we just got to stick with that narrative. And if the data shows otherwise, we'll find, we just won't publish it. Honestly, I prefer for them to publish it, to tell you the truth, and do a bad study on it. Then, like, so we at least have the data out there, but like not getting the data. Yeah, I mean, that's what you're seeing with vaping, because they do it with the BRFS. They asked about, they only asked about the behavioral risk factor surveillance system survey by the CDC. They asked only 2 years. They asked about e-cigarettes, or at least that's the data they have published, is only for 2016 and 2017. And so you're talking like, I mean, I imagine 2018, you're going to, and yeah, but yeah, your numbers look really low. It's like, oh, 3% of American adults use e-cigarettes. And they didn't really ask a very good question, but especially comparing it to like their tobacco questions. So it's just frustrating. I hate public health in America, like, so much. They've done more damage than saving lives.
Yeah, unfortunately, public health when it comes to tobacco and nicotine they don't stick to rigorous science. I think we can put it that way, can't we, really? Just one more thing, that Charles, on your social media, you've been coming out with a couple of interesting things recently, like your big thread of how the only people advertising e-cigarettes to children are the likes of Tobacco-Free Kids and all those organisations, the anti-vaping organisations. It was a cracking thread. It's true, isn't it?
Yeah, so you know, we had this war on drug stuff back in the 1980s in the United States, and the evidence I've seen show that the ad campaigns against drugs actually increased teen curiosity about drugs, and may have increased teen drug use. And so I think something similar is actually happening. It's like we can't, you know, we just keep repeating our mistakes. So basically, the messages of anti-vaping campaigns for teens in the United States, which are now spilling out into the rest of the world, are unfortunately unintentionally telling teens, all your friends are doing it, and here's where you can get nicotine, and they come in a wide variety of flavors. And if you really want to piss off adults, this is a great way to do it. And it's like, how it's like the people we're dealing with in tobacco control were never teens themselves.
That's somewhat believable, to be honest.
They were never smokers. You know,
well, some of them are former smokers, and some former smokers are the most rabid anti-tobacco, anti-smoking, anti-nicotine people on earth. So you swing, you know, way over in the other direction, and some are more sympathetic. Like I don't think smokers should be stigmatized, right? I'm not a smoker, but I was a smoker, and it's enjoyable. And you know, I don't think stigma should be a tactic in public health, period. But it is in tobacco control, and different.
Well, guys, we're reaching our final end, and you know, I've got meetings, of course, always meetings. Charles, once again, thank you for coming on. Do you have any final words for our listeners?
Well, I hope everybody follows INNCO and follows Martin and follows Lindsey. And
How can we follow you?
yeah, maybe, and be active, because we will win this fight, but there's going to be no magic bullet. It's going to be incremental steps, and it's going to be always 2 steps forward and 1 step back for some time to come, because the amount of misinformation here is tremendous. But it's a giant house of cards, and we're slowly pulling those cards out, and it's going to collapse at some point. And a lot of people are going to have egg on their face, and that's that's kind of what's helping to prop that house of cards up now. But eventually, boom, we'll get there. But it's going to take a long time, and it's going to be a long battle.
Perseverance. Martin, do you have anything to say to our listeners?
No, I'd just like to say that I agree with Charles. Politics is a long game. Nothing is won easily. The other side never sleeps. They're highly funded, and you've got to be on your guard. You've got to do everything. Apathy is our biggest enemy in this battle.
Yes, be on the offense, not the defense. So I have to sit here and say, well, listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of Across the Pond, our weekly podcast with me and Martin, one in Chicago, the other one in London. Lots of fun stuff. If you've got any ideas and topics that you'd like us to discuss, feel free to reach out to me at Lindsey at protectingtaxpayers.org.